Rain dripped from the giant leaves above as Sergeant Cal Ward moved carefully through the thick alien forest. His boots crunched soft moss with each step, and his hand never strayed far from his sidearm. He had been dropped on planet Ilaria just 3 hours ago, and already he had lost contact with his team. Strange signals jammed all comms, and the silence was making him nervous. The war hadn't even been official. One moment Earth's ambassadors were shaking hands with the Eldari Council, and the next warning shots were fired. Cal had never trusted peace treaties made too fast, especially with species who smiled too much and blinked too little. When the drop order came, it was without briefing. Just terrain, weapons, and orders to locate and secure a missing artifact. Buried deep in Eldari land, he passed a broken shrine carved from glowing stone. The carvings shimmered faintly in the mist. Words he couldn't read, dancing along its cracked surface. Cal slowed his breathing and crouched low. Something felt off. The jungle was too quiet now. No birds, no insects, only the soft patter of rain. Then he heard it, a whimper. Soft and sharp, like someone in pain but trying not to be heard. Cal moved silently toward the sound, parting thick vines with one hand while the other gripped his, rifled tighter. He didn't know if it was a trap, but he couldn't ignore it. Not when it sounded that real. Behind a curtain of green, lying on the roots of a giant tree, was a creature that took his breath away. She looked like a girl made of the forest itself. Her skin glowed soft green, her ears were pointed, and her long braided hair shimmered like emerald strands. A faint shimmer of magic hung in the air around her, and a bloodied arrow stuck from her thigh. Her eyes met his. Wide, glowing, afraid but not of him. Her chest rose quickly, and her hand covered. The wound, as if ashamed, Cal didn't move closer. Not yet. He just said, "I'm not here to hurt you," in the calmest voice he could manage. She winced and turned her face, but she didn't run. That meant something. He stepped forward slowly, then knelt. She flinched but didn't resist. The arrow was cruel and black-tipped, soaked in something that hissed against her glowing skin. Poison. His training kicked in. With practiced hands, he reached for his medkit, opened a sterilizer, and spoke gently. "This will hurt, but I'll make it quick," he said, watching her eyes carefully for a sign of trust. She nodded faintly. He snapped the arrow's shaft, clean, and pulled the barb out in one motion. She gasped sharply, clawed fingers digging into the ground. He caught her before she fell back and laid her down gently. Her pulse was weak. He poured a coagulant gel on the wound and wrapped it with pressure tape. As he worked, he felt her fingers wrap weakly around his wrist. He looked down. Her eyes weren't filled with fear anymore. They were curious, studying him like he was the strange one. And in truth, maybe he was. A human soldier treating a wounded alien who might have once been an enemy. But he didn't care about that now. He only cared about keeping her alive. The forest slowly started to breathe again. Insects returned to the air, and a soft breeze carried the scent of flowers. Cal sat beside her, keeping an eye on her pulse and breathing. He didn't know her, nay more why she had been alone and wounded. But something told him this girl wasn't just any alien. She had been left to die, and he had saved her. And in the shadows beyond the trees, something or someone was watching them both with more than curiosity. Cal didn't sleep that night, but kept his eyes on the forest's edge as the alien girl lay beside him, breathing slowly. Out after the poison was drained, her green skin covered in sweat and light glowing pulses. Her body seemed to react to pain like plants did to heat, slow and cautious, but also gentle in recovery. Cal checked her wound again and saw it healing faster than any humans would have. He built a fire with dried roots and guarded it like it was his last shield. The jungle around them moved now, alive with small sounds. He knew the Eldari hunted, in silence, using nature as a weapon. What confused him was why they would shoot one of their own with a poisoned arrow. Something about this girl didn't match anything he'd been told in the briefing. By morning, she woke slowly. Her eyes opened first, golden and sharp, like a cat's. Then her hand moved to touch the bandage Cal had placed over her leg. She looked at him with a mixture of confusion and disbelief, like she had expected to die. Cal smiled and offered her a ration bar, unwrapped and half-bitten. Not as tasty as your trees, but it keeps the stomach quiet, he joked. She sniffed it, then took a small bite. Her face twisted at the artificial flavor, but she ate it anyway. Her body needed fuel. Cal didn't press her with questions. Instead, he gestured to his chest and said, "Cal." Then he pointed to her, waiting. She blinked, then spoke softly in a language that sounded like rustling leaves. After a pause, she tried again in broken galactic trade tongue. "I am Rava." Cal nodded, repeating her name. Rava. It suited her. She touched his hand gently and tilted her head as if trying to read the story of his life through his skin. Then her eyes darted to the trees. She whispered something in her native tongue and pulled herself up, using Cal's arm. He steadied her, surprised at how light she felt. "Danger," she said simply, pointing to the trees. Cal raised his rifle and scanned the tree line. There was no movement at first, then a shadow flicked past the ferns. Another, then another. Rava's breath quickened. She touched the ground and whispered words Cal couldn't understand. The earth beneath them pulsed faintly, and glowing vines sprouted in a circle around their camp. A protective ward. She was more than just a forest girl. She had power. Figures began to appear between the trees. Lender, silver-armored, with curved bows and glowing blue eyes. Eldari warriors. Cal cursed under his breath. They hadn't come for a chat. They saw Rava alive and looked angry. Of them raised a hand and spoke in a commanding voice. Rava answered with fury, her voice sharp like cracking branches. Cal didn't understand, but he didn't need to. The arrows drawn were clear enough. Rava stepped in front of him, limping slightly. She raised her arms, and the vines around them grew taller, thorned, and protective. Cal grabbed his sidearm and aimed carefully. He didn't want to kill anyone, but if they shot first, he would end it fast. Rava shouted one last time, then silence fell. The Eldari leader paused. Then slowly he lowered his bow. The others followed. Tension hung in the air like heavy fog. Cal held his breath. The leader spoke again, eyes locked on Rava. She replied more softly this time. And finally they disappeared back into the forest without a fight. Cal waited until the last shadow faded before lowering his weapon. Rava collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. Cal ran to her and caught her before she fell again. "You're safe," he said gently, brushing hair from her face. Him with a softness he hadn't seen before. Gratitude, trust, maybe something more. She gripped his chest plate and whispered, "You protect." Cal nodded, not sure what else to say. She rested her head against him, and the jungle went quiet again. In that moment, something shifted between them. Not just survival, not just duty. It's a silent bond formed in the pressure of danger and the kindness of actions. Cal didn't understand the magic in her touch, or the strange warmth he felt around her. But he knew one thing for certain. He would protect her again if needed, even if it meant turning against his own orders. Rava moved slowly now, her steps still shaky from the poison and the tension of facing her people. Cal walked beside her with careful attention, always watching her balance. The forest around them had softened again, the trees breathing with quiet life, but Cal's thoughts remained sharp. He didn't understand the language or the history, but he knew a line had been crossed. She stopped near a fallen log covered in glowing moss and sat down with a soft sigh. Cal dropped his pack and sat beside her. His back hurt, his muscles sore from crouching all night, yet he didn't complain. Something about being near her made the pain quieter. Rava opened her palm and let a small blue insect crawl out from beneath her sleeve, lit up in her hand, pulsing like a heartbeat. Cal watched, amazed. "Is that some kind of healing bug?" he asked. Rava smiled, nodded, and placed the insect gently on her wound. It shimmered, spread its wings, and disappeared into her skin like it was part of her. The glow returned to her leg, stronger now. Her body had its own connection with nature. It's more powerful than any human medicine. She looked at him, expression thoughtful, then touched the side of his head. "You're not like others?" she said slowly. Her voice was soft, but her words carried meaning. "You save, you listen, you stay." Cal didn't speak right away. He felt her hand on his temple and the warmth in her fingers. It was strange how safe he felt with someone so different. A low hum echoed from above. Cal's instincts kicked in. He grabbed his rifle and stood, eyes scanning the treetops. A drone passed overhead, its silver shell gleaming between branches. Human tech. Recon unit, Cal muttered. Rava stood behind him, her hand gripping his arm tightly. She had seen those machines before and didn't trust them. They watch, she said. They take. Cal lowered his rifle and frowned. They're scanning for survivors. Or tracking me.
I may be both.
He stepped into clearer ground and waved toward the drone. Paused, hovered, then zipped away. Cal knew someone would be coming now. The drone had sent a signal. Oh, they had little time. Rava didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on Cal, serious and filled with silent fear. You go, she said. You safe. Cal turned and shook his head. Not without you. She looked confused. Why? Cal hesitated, then answered. Because you matter. And I don't leave people behind. Her lip trembled, and for the first time, tears filled her golden eyes. She walked to him, placed her palm against his chest, and closed her eyes. The vines around them moved gently, reacting to her emotions. If you stay, they hurt you, she whispered. Cal placed his hand over hers. Then we run first. He smiled, and she nodded slowly, trusting him again. They moved quickly now, following paths hidden under roots and moss. Rava led the way, her senses tuned to every breeze and shift in light. Cal followed without question, trusting her more than his own tracker. They reached a ridge where the forest opened into wide grasslands. In the distance, Cal saw smoke rising. Human dropships. He stopped. That's my team's landing zone, he said. Rava looked out at the same horizon and said nothing. She knew what it meant. If he returned to them, she would be left behind. If he stayed with her, he would be branded a traitor. The silence between them was heavy. Cal dropped his rifle to the ground and looked at her. I'll stay if you ask me to. Her eyes widened. But your people, she said. They think I'm your enemy. Cal nodded.
There.
Mistake. She stared at him, struggling to speak. Then she whispered, then I ask. Stay. He took a step forward, cupped her face in his hands, and rested his forehead gently against hers. Then I stay, he said. She wrapped her arms around him slowly, as if unsure whether the moment was real. The forest swayed around them, and the light between the leaves warmed their skin like the world itself agreed. In that embrace, war and duty faded away. It was no longer about missions or commands. It was about a choice made in the heart of a jungle between two beings who should have never met but had changed each other forever. They built a small shelter at the edge of the cliffside, hidden beneath overgrown roots and moss-covered branches. Rava used her connection with the forest to weave the leaves and vines into thick walls that held against wind and rain. Cal gathered stones and shaped a fire pit, using what was left of his gear to create warmth and security. Each day they worked, silently together, moving like a team that had known each other longer than a few days. Rava showed him how to find edible roots and glowing fruits that boosted energy. Cal showed her how to set traps for wild beasts that lurked too close. They were teaching each other how to survive in two worlds at once. At night, they sat by the fire, watching the stars blink through gaps in the trees. Cal would tell her stories of earth oceans that stretched past the horizon, buildings that touched the sky, and music that danced in the air. Rava listened with quiet wonder, her head resting gently on his shoulder, as if afraid the images might vanish if she let go. Her world was different. She spoke of spirits inside the rivers and songs the trees sang before a storm. Oh, she told him, that her kind once lived in harmony with every creature, until the weapons came, and power tempted, even the elders. Her voice broke when she spoke of betrayal. Cal didn't press for details. He just held her hand tighter. The forest around them had become a home, a place of calm between two storms. But that calm couldn't last. On the sixth day, the sky darkened. Not from clouds, but from the arrival of ships. Cal heard the faint hum of engines and looked up to see dark outlines crossing above the canopy. Human warcraft. And they were sweeping low. Rava froze, her senses pulsing with the energy of the land. "They come," she whispered. Kel packed their gear quickly and slung his rifle over his shoulder. "We move," he said, his voice firm. They ran together through the forest, feet pounding against the soft earth, dodging branches and leaping. Over fallen trunks, the air trembled as blasts hit the ground behind them. Trees caught fire. Animals screamed and scattered. Cal pulled Rava down a ravine, sliding through mud and crashing into roots. He shielded her body as the ground shook from nearby impacts. Smoke curled up through the leaves, staining the sky. Gray. They crawled through a tunnel of vines and emerged beside a glowing stream. Rava collapsed, coughing and covered in dirt. Cal helped her sit, wiping blood from a cut on her cheek. "We're not safe," he said. "They're scanning for heat. We need cold shelter." Rava looked at the water and nodded. She pointed downstream toward the crystal caves. They followed the stream, wading waist-deep through the chilly current. Cal's body ached from the cold, but he knew it masked their trail. Soon, the trees gave way to stone, and the mouth of a hidden cave appeared between jagged cliffs. They stepped inside, and the temperature dropped. The walls sparkled with veins of blue and silver light. Inside, the cave opened into a massive chamber. Bioluminescent crystals lit the space, casting reflections across the walls like stars caught in stone. Rava smiled for the first time that day and touched one of the glowing spires. "Safe here," she whispered. Cal dropped his gear and lit a small flame. The warmth of the fire returned color to their faces. They sat beside it, exhausted and quiet. Rava leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her. "They're going to search every inch of this forest," Cal said. "They won't stop until they find us, or think we're dead." Rava looked up at him and spoke clearly. "Then we show them nothing. No fear, no trail. We vanish." Her words gave him strength. Cal nodded. "We survived together." Rava pressed her forehead to his and whispered something in her language. He didn't understand it, but it felt like a promise, to bond deeper than any command. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting for something else. For him, the days inside the crystal cave passed like a dream wrapped in silence and glowing light. The outside world hunted them, but inside, time slowed. Cal and Rava built a rhythm. He gathered dry roots and wood from hidden paths in the jungle. Grew healing plants in the cracks of the cave walls. With whispered songs only the crystals seemed to answer. They ate what the forest gave. Drinking cold water from stone pools and sleeping wrapped in warmth and safety. Cal had never felt peace like this before. Not during training, not on Earth, not anywhere. But beneath the glowing ceiling of the cave, with her beside him, he found something he didn't know he was missing. Rava watched him closely each day. She studied his movements, his thoughts, even his pain. Her people had been raised to fear humans, trained to see them as destroyers. But Cal did not burn or take. He shared, he protected, he listened. And that was something her kind had forgotten how to trust one night. As the fire flickered low, Rava brought him a vine-wrapped bundle. She placed it in his lap without a word. Cal opened it to find a pendant carved from crystal and wrapped in soft roots. Shape was like a leaf, yet pulsing with soft blue light. "Heartstone," she said. "My gift. It bonds life to life." Cal held the pendant gently, unsure what to say. "Why give this to me?" he asked. Rava leaned forward, touching his chest. "Because you gave me mine back. I live, I breathe, I feel. Because of you." Her voice shook slightly, and her eyes glistened. Cal reached out and brushed his thumb across her cheek. "You don't?" "Oh, me anything," he said softly, but she shook her head. "Not debt, choice, I choose." She pressed the pendant into his hand and closed his fingers around it. In that moment, Cal felt the stone pulse with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. It was warm, alive, and full of something ancient and sacred. Suddenly, the crystals above them dimmed. Rava stiffened. She touched the ground with her fingers and closed her eyes. Cal watched as her expression darkened. "They come," she whispered. Cal grabbed his rifle and stood. "How many?" he asked. Rava opened her eyes. "Too many, but not from sky. From roots." Cal's stomach sank. The soldiers weren't flying in anymore. They were moving underground, through tunnels and natural caves, closing in from below. Rava moved quickly, gathering herbs and powders, and stuffing them into pouches. "We must move now," she said. "This place not safe anymore." They left the cave through a hidden crevice, climbing into a narrow path that twisted between stone and tree roots. The light faded behind them, swallowed by the jungle's breath. Cal followed her steps without question. She knew the land better than any satellite map or scout drone ever could. Hours passed before they stopped again. They reached an old ruin, swallowed by trees. Vines clung to ancient towers, and glowing carvings danced along broken archways. Rava led him through a cracked doorway into a chamber deep below. Inside stood a circle of stone, humming with energy and light. "This was the temple of my bloodline," she said. "My family ruled forest long ago, before war, before poison." Cal looked around in awe. The walls told stories through pictures etched in crystal. Warriors, spirits, peace, betrayal. He turned to Rava. "Why bring me here?" he asked. "Because here, I make vow," she said firmly. She stepped into the center of the circle and raised her arms. The vines responded, wrapping around her gently. Her hair lifted with energy, and her voice rang clear. "I call earth, water, breath. I choose him, my protector, my bond." The chamber pulsed in reply. Cal felt the ground beneath him shift. Roots reached out and curled around his boots, warm and light. He stepped forward without fear and joined her in the circle. Rava took his hands, eyes shining with power and emotion. "Now we are one. Not just hearts. Fates." In that ancient temple, something greater than both of them sealed their bond. A warrior and a forest daughter. A human and an alien. Not enemies. Not strangers. Something new. Something unbroken and far above them. The hunters came closer, without knowing what waited for them beneath the vines. Asterisk. The night outside the ancient temple was thick with heat and sound. The trees rustled not from wind, but from movement. Cal could feel it in the ground beneath his feet. Troops were near, checked his weapon again, although he knew it would not be enough if they came in numbers. Rava stood beside him, her hand resting on the roots of the temple wall. "They're searching caves first," she said. "They don't know this place yet." Cal nodded. That gave them time. Maybe an hour, maybe less. Watched her face as she listened to the forest. Her lips moved silently, and the vines around her feet stirred in response. She was more than a guide now. She was the forest's voice. "We need to send a message," Cal said. "Let them know we're not prey." Rava tilted her head. "Message how?" He stepped toward the carvings along the stone wall and pointed to the image of a warrior surrounded by light and branches. "Make them fear what they don't understand," he said. "Let the jungle answer them." She looked at him then. At the roots around them, her eyes narrowed with purpose. "Then we call the old ones," she said. Cal didn't know what that meant, but he trusted her. She placed her palm on the temple floor and began to sing. The sound was low, like the hum of distant thunder. It shook the dust from the ceiling. The stone beneath them warmed. Glowing green light spread from her hands across the floor, moving like liquid toward the outer walls. The carvings responded, lighting up one by one, each symbol casting brighter light into the chamber. Cal stepped back as vines erupted from cracks in the ground and coiled around the altar. Outside, a scream echoed through the jungle. One of the soldiers had stepped too close. Cal heard the sounds of weapons discharging and branches snapping. But it wasn't gunfire that followed. It was silence. Sudden and total. The kind that made your heartbeat sound loud in your ears. Then more screams came, louder this time. Cal ran to the entrance and looked through the vines. He saw shadows twisting through the trees. Giant shapes made of wood and light, ancient protectors awakened by Rava's song. They didn't walk. They flowed. Their limbs moved like roots in a storm. One grabbed a soldier mid-run and pulled him into the earth. He turned back to her. What are they? Rava stood slowly, her voice calm. Guardians of the forest, silent for centuries, awakened by bond, by vow.
Ow.
Cal watched her with awe. Her skin glowed like the stones. She was no longer just Rava. She was the will of the wild. The temple pulsed again. Cal felt warmth in his chest and looked down. The pendant she had given him glowed bright blue, in rhythm with the vines and stones. It wasn't just decoration, it was a key, a link. His own body responded. His muscles felt stronger, his vision clearer. Something ancient had accepted him. Outside, the sounds of battle faded. Then nothing. Rava walked beside him and opened the wall of vines. The path was clear. No enemies. Just forest again. They're gone, Cal whispered. Rava nodded, warned. Not destroyed. That was the forest's mercy. Cal exhaled slowly. He didn't like killing. This victory felt better. They stepped out together and followed a new path lit by soft light from beneath the ground. Rava led him to a high ridge, where the trees opened to reveal the stars. Cal looked up at the night sky, distant and peaceful. They'll send more, he said. They won't stop because of this. No, she agreed. But they will remember. They'll fear these roots. They'll think twice. Cal sat down and stretched his tired arms. She sat beside him and leaned into his side. Now, he asked. Rava smiled gently and looked at the horizon. Now we build. Now we protect. Cal nodded. He looked at her and saw more than beauty. He saw strength, wisdom, hope. He took her hand and held it firmly. Then we do it together. She squeezed back, her eyes glowing in the starlight. They didn't need permission anymore. Didn't need orders. Just each other. And so began the first night of something new. Not war, not peace, but a future worth choosing. The jungle changed after that night. The air no longer whispered warnings, and the trees swayed in rhythm with calm winds. Cal and Rava moved freely now, no longer hunted but watched by eyes that respected them. The forest had accepted him because she had offered him her trust. That trust was not given lightly, and Cal never took it for granted. They built their new shelter, not in hiding, but in harmony. It rose near the heart of the jungle, beneath an ancient tree that glowed with soft green light. Its roots spread, wide like arms stretching across the ground. Rava said the tree was sacred, the oldest in the forest. It had seen the rise and fall of her people. Now it would witness something new. Cal carved supports from fallen branches, using vines as ropes, and stone as foundation. Rava shaped the roof with leaves that hardened like armor under her song. They worked side by side, sweat mixing with laughter. He taught her how to strengthen the structure against storms. She taught him how to breathe with the land, not just survive on it. At night, they didn't speak much. Their bodies lay close, hands touching even in sleep. The fire crackled nearby, and the stars above blinked through the canopy like distant watchers. Rava often whispered to the spirits before sleeping. Cal didn't understand the words, but he understood the peace they brought. One evening, a faint signal reached Cal's communicator. Static filled the air, then a voice. Sergeant Cal Ward, respond. We have your last known coordinates. Extraction possible. Repeat, extraction possible. Cal sat in silence, holding the device. Rava looked at him but said nothing. The choice was his. He stood and stepped outside, breathing the thick night air. The stars above reminded him of everything he left behind. Earth, orders, uniforms, all waiting if he chose to return. The voice crackled again. Respond, Sergeant. Are you alive? Cal turned the device off and placed it on the ground. When he walked back into the shelter, Rava was watching the fire. He sat beside her and took her hand. I had the choice to leave, he said, but my choice is you. Her eyes didn't widen in surprise. She had already known. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed his forehead gently. The next morning, the jungle brought visitors. Elderly, but not soldiers. These ones were older, dressed in robes made from bark and crystal. Their faces were lined with age and marked by wisdom. Rava stood tall when she saw them, remained still beside her. The elder in front stepped forward and bowed his head. "You are Rava of the wild veins," he said, "and you, human, are now of this soil." Cal said nothing. He waited. The elder continued. "We saw the forest rise. We felt the bond. It has not chosen anyone in many cycles, but it has chosen you both. It cannot be ignored," Rava responded. In her native tongue, Cal couldn't understand her words, but her voice was strong and proud. The elder nodded slowly and looked around the shelter. "You live not as conquerors. You live as kin. That changes everything." Then he stepped back and raised a hand to his people. They bowed to Cal in silence. The elders did not stay long. They left gift seeds, medicines, tools, and vanished back into the trees without noise. Cal turned to Rava. "What does this mean?" he asked. She smiled softly. "It means we are no longer alone. The forest speaks, and now the people listen again." From that day, others came, wounded, lost, curious, both human and Eldari, who wanted no more war. They found the shelter beneath the sacred tree and saw something they didn't expect. Unity. Peace. A man and a woman from two worlds, living as one. Which was not a legend. It was real. Cal became a symbol of what could be. Not by command, not by force, but by kindness, sacrifice, and choice. And Rava stood with him, her strength rooted in the soil and spirit alike. She had once been alone, wounded, and betrayed. Now she was seen, followed, respected. Their home became a beacon, not marked on maps but known in hearts. It was no longer just a shelter. It was the beginning of something larger, something worth protecting. Asterisk rain returned to the jungle after many weeks, falling gently on leaves and soaking the earth with life. Cal stood under the wide branches of the sacred tree, watching the droplets roll down his arm. Beside him, Rava hummed a soft melody that made the vines tremble and the flowers bloom around their feet. It wasn't magic anymore. It was connection. The shelter had grown into something more. Paths formed from root and stone led to other small homes nearby. Those who came seeking peace had stayed. Some brought skills. Others brought stories. All brought hope. Humans and Eldari worked side by side, guided by the bond they had witnessed between Cal and Rava. No one wore armor here. No one carried flags or weapons unless it was for hunting or defense. The soil was respected. The air was clean. The forest gave what was needed, and the people gave back. Cal still kept his rifle hidden inside the roots, but he hadn't touched it in weeks. There was no need. The elders returned often, not to command, but to learn. They listened to Rava's words and watched her lead with patience, not power. Always remained nearby, but never stood in front. She was the voice. He was the shield. Together, they became balance. The people started calling them the Heartstone Pair. One day a ship landed in a distant clearing. It bore Earth's insignia. Cal approached it alone, walking through the trees like one of the forest's own. Two officers stepped out, stiff and cold in metal suits. They saluted and handed him a message from Earth's command. It offered him honors, a medal, a return to duty. He read the message in silence, then looked up. "Tell them I already have what I came here for," he said, "and I'm not leaving." The officers tried to reason with him, but he stood firm. Duty was never about fighting. It was about protecting life. "That's what I'm doing now." Then he turned and walked away. They didn't follow. When Cal returned, Rava was waiting under the tree. She didn't ask what was said. She only reached out and placed her hand on his chest, where the Heartstone pendant still hung.
Ow.
It pulsed softly, just as it had that first day she gave it to him. They stood there together in silence, listening to the forest breathe around them. Later that night, the fire crackled brightly as the community gathered. Children played near the roots. Songs filled the air. Cal told a story about his first time flying in Earth's atmosphere, how he had thought the ship would fall apart. The crowd laughed. Even Rava, whose laugh sounded like wind through leaves. Then, Rava stood and walked to the center of the gathering. She raised her hand and the voices quieted. Her eyes searched each face before she spoke. "We were taught to fear," she said, "to destroy what we do not understand." But one man changed. That, for me, he did not conquer, he cared. And through him, I saw that peace is not weakness. It is courage. Cal lowered his eyes as her words settled in the air. She walked to him and took his hand. "From this day," she continued, "we do not call this place exile or escape. We call it home." The crowd rose to their feet, placing hands over their hearts or their chests. Unity didn't need to be shouted. It needed to be lived. Seasons passed. The jungle changed again, but so did the people. Trees grew taller, their roots stronger. The heartstone glowed at the center of their world, not as a weapon or trophy, but as a memory of choice. A human chose not to run. An alien chose not to fear. And from that moment, a new story was written. Cal sat beneath the sacred tree, older, now, but still strong. Rava sat beside him, her hair longer and streaked with light. She leaned her head on his shoulder as the sun dipped below the trees. The forest was calm, the world was quiet. And together, they watched it all with hearts full of peace. Because what began with an arrow and a wound had ended with a bond no blade could ever break.